Most people think they know what the Bible looks like: white robes, pale faces, and European art. But what if I told you everything you thought you knew was filtered through centuries of distortion? What if I told you that black people weren't just in the background of biblical history, they were in the center of it? This is not about race superiority, it's about reclaiming truth that was buried under centuries of silence. It's about looking at the scriptures with fresh eyes, peeling back layers of interpretation that have colored our understanding for far too long. Today we journey back to the very roots of faith, to uncover 7 shocking facts about black people in the Bible that they won't tell you, but that scripture absolutely confirms. Genesis chapter 2 verse 7, that foundational verse, tells us God created man from the dust of the ground, not porcelain, not snow, dust, and anyone who's walked through the Middle East or Africa knows that soil is dark, rich, and alive. Science itself seems to whisper agreement. Modern humans trace their ancestry back to Africa, and biblical geography, it places the Garden of Eden itself near Ethiopia and Kush lands where the sun kissed skin for centuries. The very roots of humanity, black, not just included in God's image but foundational to it. Imagine that, the very first humans crafted from the rich soil of Africa bearing the image of God. This isn't about claiming superiority but about recognizing a truth often obscured. It's about understanding that the story of humanity begins with the very people history often tries to erase. And that's just the first revelation. When you think of the Bible, most people imagine Israel, Babylon, or Rome. But Africa is woven into the very fabric of the Bible. Noah's son Ham, remember him? He fathered nations like Cush, Ethiopia, Mizraim, Egypt, and Put, Libya. These weren't insignificant outposts, but the cradles of civilization. Abraham, the father of faith, journeyed through Egypt. Joseph, sold into slavery, rose to become a leader in Egypt, saving a nation from famine. And Moses, raised by Pharaoh's daughter, he led his people out of Egypt, the land of his upbringing. Let's not forget Jesus himself, finding refuge in Africa when his life was under threat. The Holy Family sought safety, sought sanctuary, on the African continent. The Bible was not just a Middle Eastern story, it was a deeply African one too. Africa wasn't relegated to the sidelines, it was the stage upon which some of the most important stories unfolded. Think all biblical heroes looked European? Think again. The Bible is rich with figures whose heritage points directly to Africa. Nimrod, one of the first kings mentioned in the Bible, was the grandson of Ham. That makes him African by blood. Founder of mighty cities like Babylon and Nineveh, a ruler, a builder, his lineage stretches back to the African continent. And then there's Moses. He didn't just travel through Africa, he married an Ethiopian woman. And when his family dared to criticize his choice, God himself struck Miriam with leprosy. That's how seriously God took prejudice and discrimination. Let's not forget the Queen of Sheba, likely from Ethiopia, who tested King Solomon with her wisdom and grace. Their meeting was legendary, and Ethiopian tradition claims their son founded Ethiopia's royal line. Even in the final moments of Jesus' life we see Africa. Simon of Cyrene, the man who helped carry Jesus' cross, he was African, from modern-day Libya. On the most sacred day in history, a black man walked with Christ. These weren't isolated incidents. These were key figures, prophets, and kings, woven into the very tapestry of the Bible. One of history's greatest distortions, a tool used to justify unimaginable cruelty, was the misuse of the curse of Ham. It was twisted, manipulated, to justify slavery. But the Bible tells a very different story. Noah cursed Canaan, not Ham. And Canaan's descendants didn't settle in Africa, they lived in the Middle East. The curse had nothing to do with skin color or race, it was about disobedience, not about ethnicity. Yet this false interpretation fueled centuries of racism and oppression. It's a stark reminder of how easily scripture can be manipulated to serve agendas that have nothing to do with God's heart. The Bible's stance on slavery is clear. Exodus chapter 21 verse 16 states, "Anyone who kidnaps another and sells him shall be put to death." That's not just anti-slavery, that's divine justice. The truth is, the Bible condemns oppression in all its forms. Chapter 5. Deuteronomy 28 speaks of a people taken in ships sold into slavery, and no one would buy them. While interpretations vary, this verse has drawn attention from many scholars and communities who see parallels with the transatlantic slave trade. Whether a direct prophecy or not, this verse resonates deeply with the horrific experience of millions. It speaks to a God who sees suffering, who hears the cries of the oppressed. And even beyond this specific passage, Scripture constantly speaks against oppression. Psalms 103 verse 6, "The Lord works righteousness and justice for all the oppressed." God didn't ignore black suffering, He warned about it, wept through it, and promises to redeem it. He walks with those who suffer, offering comfort, strength, and ultimately, liberation. Even in the darkest chapters of history, God's presence is a beacon of hope. Chapter 6. Let's be clear, Christianity is not a white man's religion. That's not opinion, it's fact. Long before colonialism ever touched the continent, Africa was shaping the course of Christianity. The church in Alexandria, Egypt, was one of the earliest and most powerful in Christian history. A beacon of faith and scholarship, it nurtured some of the greatest minds of the early church. Augustine of Hippo, one of Christianity's most influential thinkers, was African. His writings shaped theology for centuries, and his legacy continues to inspire. Acts 13 verse 1 mentions Simeon called Niger, literally meaning black, as a prophet and teacher in the early church. This wasn't a footnote in history. This was a leader in the early Christian movement. Christianity wasn't given to Africans, it was born in their lands, nurtured by their communities, and spread through their dedication. It's time to reclaim this history, to acknowledge the African roots that run deep within the Christian faith. Chapter 7. Let's be clear. Black history is not just about slavery and suffering. It is about purpose, strength, faith, survival. It's about overcoming unimaginable obstacles to build, to create, to love, to forgive. Black people have always been central to God's plan. You were not an afterthought. You were not a mistake. 1 Peter 2 verse 9 says, "You are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession." That includes black people, always has. Your story didn't start on a slave ship. It started in Eden. It includes prophets, queens, warriors, and disciples. And it's still being written today. Embrace your heritage. Walk in your purpose. You are chosen. You are loved. You are powerful. Outro. The Bible has always included black people, not in the background, not as a footnote, but at the center of God's plan. It's time to see the scriptures with fresh eyes, to recognize the faces that have always been present. When we strip away centuries of distortion and return to Scripture itself, we see the truth. You are not forgotten, you are not cursed, you are chosen. Share this truth, speak it boldly, and walk in the purpose God designed for you from the very beginning. Because no one can erase what God has written. Your legacy is not defined by oppression but by the resilience, faith, and love that shines through you.